Hello, welcome to everyone watching today live on Prove All Things. You would be watching on maybe Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or on our website. We thank you for joining us. This is a pre-recorded program, so we will not be able to put your comments up today, but we do welcome you to comment. I'm joined with co-host Mike James. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, Jeff, doing very well. You sound a little bit better today, so I guess you're on the mend.
Yes, yes, I am. Really, I've not been very sick at all. I mean, I tested positive for COVID. Had a lot of COVID in my nose. I can't, I can tell that because of sneezing and stuff, and I don't have any smell, which is kind of weird. But I've been told by people who went through this that the smell does come back. But other than that, I feel perfectly fine. Just the worst thing is being stuck in this bedroom and isolating from the family, isolating from the rest of the world, just keeping everybody else safe best I can. So
Good, very good. Yeah. So I guess with the day that people will be viewing this, I'll be ready to shut down my house and then leave the following day for California. So I hope that the next time we're live, I've got my house with Wi-Fi, and I'll be able to give you a live program from the new house. So I hope it all works out, and we'll see everybody on the other end of this. But we wanted to get this this program in, try to keep that record going of weekly program.
Are you going to bring that background with you, or are you going to try for a different setup?
You know what? I'm going to expand, but I'll have this background with me, but I'm going to expand once I get out there, give you more of a California feel. So I got to think about it a little. Okay.
Definitely. All right. We are joined today from Texas with Blake Silverstein. How you doing, Blake?
Hey, guys. How y'all doing?
Hey, Blake. I like that you all with the Texas.
Yeah,
that's right. When I went out yesterday, I checked the mail, and I still have no shirt. There was nothing there, no Prove All Things shirt. So
yeah, that's
what's up with that, Jeff?
That's up to me. I got to get those shirts made and out to everyone. So many things haven't just coming up before that, but maybe at the feast or something.
Look, COVID is no excuse for you.
No excuse for anything.
Happy you're feeling better, man. Yeah, and I'm sure isolating has been probably the worst part of that.
Yeah.
So,
and I have to tell people I never really felt bad, so I don't want people to feel bad for me or say, "Oh, I'm sorry," because I just felt like I had a minor head cold. So that's so many people who are doing so much worse that we need to keep praying for those folks.
Certainly,
and their recovery and stuff, and just I believe do all I can to keep everybody else safe. Is the best thing we can do, I guess, as Christians.
Good man. No, absolutely. And I think, we were talking, you called me earlier this week. You're like, oh yeah. And kind of an aside, I tested positive for COVID. I'm like, okay, all right. It didn't seem like it affected you too much, but happy to hear.
I'm very glad because, it could have went a different way. So definitely I praise God for all that, that God is looking out for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, so happy to be back on the show. Happy, before I get started, just both you guys, man, I'd have to acknowledge the snot out of both of you for putting this together, keeping it going, right? You got Mike here who's moving literally. I don't know if there's any further you can move in the continental United States, right? From where you are. And you got you with COVID. You're like, no, man, we're gonna record. We're gonna, we're gonna trudge on and putting this show together. So, I acknowledge you both for doing this for the brethren. It's awesome.
Thanks, Blake. Appreciate that. And I just want to acknowledge you and the other guest hosts that we have from time to time on a regular basis for you guys continuing to come back, continuing to come up with topics. We can't do it without you. It's a team effort. And I just want to put that out there to the Church of God folks who are listening, that it's a team effort, regardless of organization, regardless of church affiliation. We're all in this together, and we can't lose sight of that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you've had kind of a cross Church of God kind of, a lot of different people from different organizations. It's not just Church of God. You're not just getting folks from inside Church of God International, right? So
Yeah,
that's
and we're going to expand on that a little more as we move into the future too. Jeff and I have discussed that. Yeah,
Yeah, it definitely
awesome.
helps because I mean, to come up with a show every week, you got to have some help. You need a lot of help.
Yeah,
We appreciate it.
certainly. And I'm hopefully today, won't be my last appearance on your show. I think I'm gonna be swinging for the fences a little bit. I think it's in the vein of prove all things. Let's just jump into it, right?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I want us to discuss the science. People throwing around phrases like, well, the science is settled, or, follow the science, or believe the science, like capital T, capital S, the science, right? And as Ben Shapiro kind of, quips and chuckles, the science. And it's a field of study. It's a way of examining things. And so what I want us to discuss today is 10 different statements or 10 different beliefs in the scientific community that are maybe kind of questionable. Let's prove those things. Let's look at them. These are kind of dogmatic statements that I would like for us to go through, and I will basically go back through them. Might be able to have time to go through each one of them. Want to kind of see what you guys think, and really. I don't know if you guys want to say anything just to that about what's going on with science right now. Did you
yeah,
want to speak to
you
that?
hit me. You hit me, Blake. There's something popped into my mind immediately when you said that.
Sure.
And if you don't mind, Jeff, I'm just going to bring it up. Let's bring up COVID for a moment. Okay.
Oh, here we go. All right, here we go.
So this is what I wanted to say. That there's a lot of argument, a lot of debate on both sides of the COVID issue. And people are getting wrapped around the axle because they hear that they should do this or they should do that. And then they hear later that, no, maybe you should have done this or maybe you should have done that. And I think what is so important is science is an ongoing thing. It is not a settled thing. At least most of science is not settled. There's always new information coming in that can change the quote unquote science. So it's a continual thing. It's a progressive thing. What evolutionists thought years ago is discounted by many evolutionists today. They have new theories of evolution today.
Right.
Of course, I'm a creationist. I believe God did it all. I don't believe in evolution. I believe in natural selection. I believe in adaptation and things of that nature, but I don't believe that a species changes into a completely different species. But the point I want to make is we got to quit fighting each other, especially in the church, when it comes to, well, you should do this or you should do that, and getting dogmatic about things. Science is not a settled thing. It's a continual process where new information is brought in and reevaluated and then looked at again. So that's all I wanted to say to start things off.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to say that I've kind of lived that this past week because the best, and again, science is like the guidance when I went to Disney was, hey, if you're vaccinated, you can go down, you can interact with a lot of people, and like, all right, I was living it up like it was 2019. I was getting into the things. There's people everywhere, and then like after during that week, they're like, oh, we found out that there are some breakthrough cases, with the Delta variant, and that they're mild, and I guess mine's been mild, but they can spread it to other people. I was like, oh, and so and that made me feel kind of mad. I was like, oh, I want my freedom, but then I understand now after having this that they're just looking at the best science and they're trying to come up with guidelines based on what they know at the current time. So so I try not to get mad at folks because things change. Just try to understand why they're making those changes.
Sure, and to be sensible, about things, but they're the science isn't settled, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
the issue is that we have well-credentialed experts on both sides of this empirical question, right? That are both kind of picking and pulling at it, and that's good science. That's science that needs to be rough and tumble, right? We're kind of battling it out. We're kind of taking our evidence, our proofs. We're taking our theories. We're rebutting. We're going back and forth. We're pushing and pulling on this thing because if it's true, doesn't matter what it's true. Doesn't matter what dogma you have. And the problem is that there are scientists who will say that the science is settled and don't want to have a discussion. They don't want to discuss it. They say it's already been done. We already know this thing. It's like, hold on, where's your proof? Where's your evidence? That's what science is, right? And there was an article on Zero Hedge called "How Science Becomes Religion," and if you don't mind, I'm going to read a quote from the article. It's really good. So the clearest problem with the admonition to believe the science is that it is of no help whatsoever when well-credentialed scientists, that is, bona fide experts, are on both sides or all sides of a given empirical question. Dominant parts of the intelligentsia may prefer we not know this, but dissenting experts exist on many scientific questions that some blithely pronounce as settled or by a consensus, that is, beyond debate. This is true regarding the precise nature and likely consequences of climate change and aspects of coronavirus and its vaccine. And it's like you hit it right on the head there. And so what I would like to do is for us to go through, let's say, 10 dogmas, and let's see it's inside the scientific community. And dogma is basically inclined to lay down principles as incontrovertible truth. It's not up for discussion. It's just you dogmatically think of something. What's up?
Hey, Blake, if I could, for those listening to this show today, I want you to think about these things also in relation to church beliefs or dogmas.
Yes.
Like there are things we believe within the Church of God International, keeping the Sabbath, keeping the holy days, the law still matters. And then there are other things that the church does not have as dogma, but most in the church believe, but we can't necessarily prove them from the Bible. A couple examples would be some in the church believe in a young earth. Some in the church believe in the gap theory or an old earth, okay? And again, those things can't be proven from the Bible. There, you can speculate, but based on the Bible. But I think that people need to listen from that perspective also, because one of the major problems I see in the church is the fighting, the infighting that goes on holy day issues, on calendar issues, on law issues. And there are many things we cannot prove dogmatically.
Amen.
So we need to put that to the side and concern ourselves with getting salvation and getting that gospel of the kingdom out. Let's go with what we know is dogma, Sabbath, holy days, law, things of that nature, no doubt. But the stuff that is, like you're saying, you can't prove it. We need to quit fighting about that stuff. It's tearing us apart. We need to be together. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Certainly.
I have a comment though based on Mike's. That's kind of I like so in church, like what a lot of people do, like say I believe in an old earth. Well, what I can do is I can go and say, well, I believe in an old earth, so I'm going to look in the Bible for everything that supports that.
Yeah.
And ignore anything that contradicts that. Right. And that's very dogmatic. It's a very religious way of thinking. And science can be that way also, where somebody says, well, I believe this is true, so I'm going to go back and look for only the facts that support why I believe it's true and ignore any other evidence. And that's not right in anything to do that.
Great point, Jeff. That is a fantastic point. Again, working for the federal government, some of my years involved analytical work. I got trained as an analyst at the Central Intelligence Agency. Let me tell you, I wasn't able to do it for a long period of my career, but those folks have to look and all of the other information that goes against what they think is happening. And I'll give you a perfect example. The weapons of mass destruction during the Iraq war situation. We got it wrong. We got it wrong at the CIA. And look into that. There's a great book called Curveball that talks about how we got it wrong and why we got it wrong. And it can help you look at anything in life that you're dealing with where you got two sides giving you different information, how to address all of that information and come up with a best case idea, even though you're not sure. That's what intelligence is. It is a gray area, and a lot of theology is a gray area too.
It is. No, and I think that I'm really happy you guys brought this up in the relation to our beliefs, because you're right. You should be able to look at your Bible and say, this is the reason why I believe these things, right? This is the scripture that I believe, in the Sabbath. This is the reason why I believe this. And there's a lot of things that are dogmatic about our faith that we need to say, hey, look, I don't know, but it occurs to me, or how I understand it, are these things, right? But that's not how people say it. They say, this is the way it is. And if you don't believe this way, you don't have the Holy Spirit, or you're not going to be in the kingdom, right? You've heard this one before. And it's like, hey, look, I don't know about all that. And Ron said a great thing about this. He said, look, the biggest problem facing the church is our inability to disagree peaceably. It's like, oh man, yeah, right? It's like, how eloquent and how accurate. And we don't say, and he said there was like three things. There's like, look, there's what's scriptural. You can prove it absolutely. There's what's implied by scripture. You can kind of like extrapolate from scripture. And then there's like your way out in the field. You're way out in the weeds. It's speculative, it's conjecture. And hey, all three are fine as long as you hang the label on what you're talking about. Hey, look, I'm just speculating here. I'm just, this is, and that's the problem, is that people don't hang the proper labels on what they're saying. And that's how dogma, starts to creep into the church, and you start to have splits and all this. But anyways, so let me go through all these 10 different, statements. These 10 statements were actually brought up in, I've never had an original idea in my life. Okay. All this stuff is from someone else. Okay. Blake's never had an original.
Under the sun.
That's right. This is all from Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, and he wrote a book called Science Set Free. He's not a quack. He's, went to Cambridge, very smart guy. And he started to notice all these things in his science. He's a physicist. And he saw all these things that are like laws, capital L laws, right? And he said, these 10 things, as you start to look at them deeper and deeper and examine them, they start to kind of fall apart. And these are 10 things that I will say that every single scientist believes dogmatically. In other words, unquestionably. They just don't question it. It's just the way it is. The first one is, and I'll form them in a phrase of a question, is nature mechanical? The idea that everything in the world is like a lumbering robot. It's just reacting. Like one thing happened in the very beginning, and now everything is just constantly reacting mechanically. That's it. Mm-hmm. Number two, is the total mass and the amount of energy always the same in the universe? This is the law of the conservation of energy, right? Where that every bit of energy, every bit of matter that has ever existed and will ever exist is here in the universe right now. Number three, are the laws of nature fixed? They have these things called universal constants in physics. Do they stay the same no matter what? Number four, is matter unconscious? Including ourselves, right? We're matter. We're unconscious, as they would like us to be, possibly, right? Number five, is nature purposeless? In other words, is there are we just constantly evolving and that's it? That there's no real rhyme or reason to it? Mm-hmm. Number six, and then I'll go back through these one at a time, right? Mm-hmm. Number six, is all biological inheritance material? In other words, is all your developmental progress dependent upon what's in your genes? Not your blue genes, Skip. I know he'll be watching this. The genes that your, GENES genes. Is it material? And seven, are memories stored as material traces? Somehow, everything you remember, everything that that you call to remembrance, is just in your brain. That's what they believe, and that's, anyways, we could, it's modified nerve endings, it's phosphorated proteins. There's, all these, but it's all in the brain. That's all there is. Number 7, are memories stored? I'm sorry, number 8. Are minds confined to the brain? Everything that you experience is only inside of your head. And number 9, are psychic phenomena illusory? You know, like telepathy, or having, your thoughts and your intentions don't have an effect from afar, from a distance, on something that is just inside your head, and it's just, illusory. Prayer, right, doesn't anyways, well, I'll go through and disprove these. But
Okay.
number 10, is mechanistic medicine the only kind of medicine that really works? And if so, this is probably the reason why governments only fund and give grants to organizations that research this kind of medicine.
So,
Anything you guys want to say?
let me understand this, Blake. Are you saying
Okay.
that this gentleman is saying that those 10 items you just gave us are what are considered by scientists doctrinal in science? Could I say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, he says, look, these are unquestionable. That's ridiculous. Of
Okay.
course
Yeah,
they should.
I would
Yeah.
I would argue immediately with some. I got some examples
Yeah.
for some of those
Yeah.
Right.
from even scientists who would
That's right.
argue against
That's
some.
right.
Yeah. Well,
And that's what he was saying.
I would say, and I would question him, is he sure that all scientists believe this? Because I think there's
He'll say
scientists.
majority. He'll say majority. He would say
Okay.
a majority, and I think he would agree that there are they're called materialists, right? They don't
Right.
believe and that dominates academia. I
Right.
mean, that this is, if you if you dissent from some of these dogmas, you're considered a quack. You're considered to not be a part of real science.
Okay.
And that's what he's saying. Look, we're finding things, and how often do you hear, we thought this thing 5 years ago, but now we've found out that it's actually this other thing. It's like,
Sure.
Yeah.
why isn't that true for these other things? And don't get me wrong, science is awesome, man. Science is great. Here we are, we're talking on, face to face. You're, across the country, you're across the country, I'm across the country. We're recording it to be broadcast at a later date. I mean, this is all technology that has been given to us through science.
Yeah.
By God, though. By God. That's the thing that people don't get. They're like, look, somehow, all truths are God's truths. St. Augustine said this, right? And it's like, look, don't get this twisted. All these things came from God, and we're kind of tumbling to these things. And his biggest gripe, his biggest qualm with all of this is like, you say they're laws, capital L laws. Aren't they more like habits? Aren't they things that we've kind of noticed that they're likely, they tend to go this way? But to say that they'll never change, they'll never evolve, which is interesting. He's not a religious guy, by the way. I think he's agnostic, right? He believes he does not, Christian, but he's just saying, look, you can't just be dogmatic about all this stuff. So, anyways, yeah, these, and this is something that is across society now. You'll have people in office that believe this kind of stuff. They're making laws. They're making social decisions. They're making decisions on vaccines. They're making decisions on society, economic decisions, right? We have these scientists who are being held in capacities as politicians. Look, a politician has been trained and developed and thinking about policy, about the trade-offs, right? These aren't trained politicians on policy. They're just experts in their field, but they're being, Dr. Fauci is anyways, I don't want to get too far. I just think they're operating in a capacity that is beyond their training. And maybe you guys, I don't know what you want to say to that, but.
Well,
No,
I would say that, I guess this situation has kind of forced that upon us, where we are, people are seeking information, seeking the best guidance on how to address this, and you have to find out, what do you know? This guy here, he knows something about infectious diseases. This person here knows this. There's certain things like, from a political social thing make no sense. Like, for example, and the CDC has put this moratorium on what is it, on people being evicted
Yes,
because
sir. Yeah.
of this. And so again, they're doing it because they say, yeah, there's a virus out there. We want people to be safe, but they do that without looking at how does this affect the people who are landlords? How does this affect the economy?
Yeah.
There's so many things that affects. How does it affect people saying, "Oh, I don't have to pay rent,
Great
I don't have to go to
example.
work, or whatever"? There's all kinds of things that are in this decision that's being made by scientists that maybe should have had more thought put into it.
Great example. Great example.
Right.
So, and so he's like, look, these people are the types of people who say, I don't believe in God, I believe the science, and that's kind of the dogmatic portion of all of this, and so, it's kind of interesting to me because people that know science basically got its start from religious organizations and institutions. Um, you know, that the Catholic Church commissioned a lot of the research that has given science its foundation. I mean, you have early Greek ideas, and that might be considered to be really the genesis of science in some ways. But a lot of the developmental things that took place in the 19th century were from Catholic organizations commissioning schools, universities, hospitals, right? And a famous historian of science, Pierre Duhem, credited medieval Catholic mathematicians and philosophers such as John Bourdain, and you got Nicole Oersman and Roger Bacon as the founders of modern science. These are Catholics, right? These are people who believe in God. And what I was thinking about is like, look, God's way of life that we find in the Bible creates a rhythm to life, right? Creates a way of life that works, that if you follow it, your life will work. And there's this thing about the Sabbath, there's things about the holy days, there's all these things about this rhythm of life that creates consistency, that creates stability, creates workability, and it gives you enough time and safety to sit down and to look through your telescope, look through your microscope, and to notice something. And that's what science is, right? At this date and this time, I looked at this thing and I noticed it did this thing over and over again, and I can replicate that, and I can prove that. Only through following God's laws and His system have we been given enough time and peace to sit down and develop science, is my postulation. And what do you guys think about that?
Well, I'm going to say, like our show, the scientific method really is prove all things, hold fast to things that are true, right? In other words, things are testable and they're also repeatable. Like if if something is, say, hey, I believe this happens, then other people should be able to repeat that and test it and say, okay, yeah, we did it. And some other people, yeah, we did it. So this is testable. And just like good doctrine is testable, just based upon that biblical belief is how science, I think, was born through that, being able to be critical and thinking and looking for evidence.
Yeah, exactly. I think God wants that from us. God doesn't just give us salvation. God doesn't make it easy for us. There's work to be done in trying to figure this all out, in coming out of false religion, in coming out of churches that you feel are not sticking to the biblical standard. Choices, decisions, free will is in play. And that has a lot to do with science, because you're making decisions, you're discovering things. And that's so true in the discoveries that I had in coming to the beliefs that I have today. It was hard work to get where I'm at today. And science, if you're doing it right, is hard work. And here's the thing I think scientists need to understand. There's always a question. There's always more questions that come once you reach a certain level. Then you have further questions to take you to that next level.
Certainly. No, and this is how atheists come to God, by the way. They go, look, man, This is the oldest book. This is the oldest story we've been telling. And there are axiomatic ideas in here that are true no matter what society you say them in. No matter what language they're uttered in, they are true, right? And they work no matter what. And it's like, this is what Jordan Peterson says. Look, it's been he's like, I read through the Bible and I go, look, I can't disprove this thing, right? That is, sit down and try to write something that is axiomatically true no matter what. It's almost impossible, right? And he said,
in this time of moral relativism today, I think that when you go to the Bible and you see the truths that are evident there about morality and how if you follow morality, life becomes so much easier and better for you. If you're not following morality, there's going to be issues. You can't escape that. That's a truth that you cannot deny.
Nope. Well, because we don't hear about the people that don't.
Here's the thing: when we talk about science and these things scientists stick to, there's a reason why that psychiatrists or psychiatric people aren't treating people who have the gender dysphoria correctly, right? Because instead of just basing things on science, science tells us we have a male and female through scientific and all kind of discovery have different traits that are it's a binary thing, and yet here's a mental disorder that we have decided not to treat from a scientific point of view, right? We treat it now from more political point of view, and and I would say, for example, there was a disorder that was really big in like maybe 1800s where people thought they were made out of glass. They was like people believed it, and they said, it was just, and a lot of people just suffered and thought they were made out of glass and they would break. And so the worst thing to have done for those people is to pretend that they were made out of glass, right?
That's right. That's right.
You like your glass, no, that's not a way to help them. You have to get them past this mental issue and stuff.
Yeah.
And so science in that regard is no longer helping these people who are having this problem. Is going to a point of just not helping and making the problem worse and expanding the problem.
Yeah, guys, I'm writing a booklet on gender dysphoria right now. Hopefully it'll come out in the next year and we'll get it into the international news. But what Jeff just said about what science is saying, I mean, world-renowned psychiatrists who've done the research, who've worked with children who have gender dysphoria and have solved it for over 80% of some of these kids that come to this, some of these psychiatrists have been solved of the problem through normal psychological counseling, etc.
Sure.
And what's happening today is you've got psychiatrists on the other side of the equation who are pushing this agenda that whatever you feel, that's what you are, because they don't believe there's a God. They don't believe there's any morality about this.
That's right.
And they're going in that direction. And the book is called Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier. Read that book. It's an eye-opener. And I'm going to discuss a lot of that in the booklet I'm writing on this subject.
Yeah, awesome. That's just an obvious thing we can see where science is not being looked at, or they're saying, well, the science says, how we're treating these folks. Well, that's not what the science says. That's just what you say. All the evidence actually shows something different.
And I'll bring up the nuance of intersex, right? The idea that there are some that have, let's say, that they're, they have both genitalia, right?
Yeah, and that is something that does happen. Yes,
that does happen, and that's difficult to deal with. But it's like 0.0001% of people have this thing, and so we're applying something that is a new, like an outlier, and then making sweeping changes to all of our logic and our rationale and our science on gender based on the outlier. Now, those outliers, like you just said, need to be treated in such a way where they go through a customized, unique treatment process, like most things, right? And that they have a way. To now say that small case now sets the model for everything else it's lunacy. It's ridiculous. And you said it earlier, which is great. Which is it's because it comes from their disbelief of God. right? They don't want that judgmental God in the sky telling them what they can and can't do. And this is from Aldous Huxley. He said, look, he was an atheist, and he wrote A Brave New World. And he said, look, at least he had in Yiddish you have a word for gall. It's called the chutzpah. He had the wherewithal to say it. Go ahead and say it. I didn't. Look, we were moral relativists because we didn't want that God interfering with our sexual proclivities. It's like at least he said it. Most of us say, oh no, it's just there's no proof that he exists. It's like, man, get out of here with that.
Yeah. If you look at some of the early evolutionists, I'm going back to Darwin's time, those who were getting into that philosophy that Darwin got going, many of them were dabbling in the occult, in black arts. It's an interesting read if you look back and research some of those early evolutionists and what they were getting involved in.
Sure, and really what happened is there was this departure from the materialist idea, theory was really coined and brought to light by starting in the early 19th century. This is when it really became, they divorced God from science, right? Was from Rene Descartes. This guy that's I think therefore I am guy. Remember this dude? No, dude, you are and you think. That's you got it all twisted. And this guy was basically to the point of such a strong materialist that that we're such lumbering robots that are just chemical reactions happening, that he would perform examinations on live animals and not administer anesthesia, because they're just reacting. They're not feeling pain. He would say that they're much like a horn is just making a sound once you push air through it, or when like a bell rings whenever you tap it on the side. I mean, that's the kind of evil that develops from science without God. And I mean, you want to look at some horrific things that have happened in society. Talk about atheist, regimes that have killed more people than any other, belief system. People say, oh, well, all these crusades, religion's been, responsible for all these deaths. Like, hold the phone. What about Mao? What about Stalin? What about Hitler? These men. Anyways, really...
no doubt, religion has made mistakes too. I don't argue that point. But those people who were making mistakes in religion, I submit to you, they did not understand their religion well enough. And you're right on there, Blake. Look at Mengele and the Nazis. Look at the communism and what it has done. Whether it's in China or the old Soviet Union or Cambodia. Again, just ridiculous atrocities that were done by people who didn't have God in the picture and were operating from a completely scientific mindset. Everything's materialistic. It's all natural. We can do whatever we want. And look what they wrought upon their societies.
Yeah, I mean, cold-hearted evil. I mean, that's what I think of when I think of just cold, calculating, needless eaters, right? What they call needless or feeders or whatever. I can't remember what the term they use for eugenics, but that they were, horrific, right, things. And this was all, again, it's kind of, and they're doing it dogmatically. And so anyways, this guy gets into, look, he can hoist them by their own petard, right? He can hoist these dogmatic statements by even just science itself, not even getting into godly things. I don't want us to get into some scriptural things that will actually talk and disprove some of these things. The problem for me is that there are some Christians out there who feel like they can ride both horses, right? That they can be dogmatic about, and they're scientists and Christian, right? And there's nothing wrong. I think that both you guys are strong Christian men who like the scientific method, who enjoy this kind of hypothesizing and using the scientific method to come up with God's truths. That's a great thing. But there are some people who do, Christians who think they can dogmatically hold these things to be true and be Christian. It's like, no, man, you can't do that. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I think theistic evolution, which is people who believe in God of the Bible, and then they say evolution is real. Again, I don't agree with that at all. I've talked to some of them, and I've got some real issues with how they view the world and see science through that prism. Yeah.
Sure. Well, so let's look at the first one. Is nature mechanical? This idea that there were nothing more than lumbering robots, to Richard Dawkins, wrote in his book, The God Delusion. Let's talk about the science delusion, okay? That we are just lumbering robots and that we're just constant chemical reactions. It's like, hold on, man. If you're a Christian, you have something inside of you that is beautiful and awesome and unique, and that is different than any other thing in creation, called the Holy Spirit. We know this. 2 Corinthians 1:22, he anointed us, placed his seal on us, and he put his spirit in our hearts. 1 John 4:13, hereby know we that we dwell in him, and he in us, because he hath given us his spirit. Right? 2 Timothy 1:14. I could go on. There's a lot, right? there's tons of statements in the Bible that say you are not just a lumbering robot. You are not just reacting.
I saw a story yesterday that made me think of how nutty some science can be. And it was like they were discussing like what should we qualify as a person, and they were and the argument of this person, I guess, writing this was that we should probably consider all animals people because they're individuals and they have life because they're no different from us.
Yeah.
And and they're saying hey, a gorilla's a person because so what is there's no really difference. Maybe they're not as smart as we are, but they should have the same kind of person rights as we do. If you have that point of view, if you don't understand there is something innately different in human beings than there is in the rest of animals.
C.S. Lewis said, look, a rock will, falling from a high distance is following the law of gravity, which makes it not only a person but a citizen. I mean, right? I mean, at that lunacy, that degree where they're coming from the presupposition that God does not exist, right? The Bible is not true. So yeah, that's the logical conclusion to such an absurd, preposition. So, and then they have it that and I thought I'd bring up Romans 1:20, which talks about for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived, being understood by what has been made, so that they are without excuse. I like the way the NIV puts it a little bit better here. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have clearly been seen, being understood from what has been made. Everything we see around us, all these amazing, wonderful things, have come into existence. And that it says so that people are without excuse. These scientists, when you look at it, you observe something, and you go, "Whoa!" We shoot a photon into a vacuum, and it lines up in the top left-hand corner, no matter which angle, no matter which trajectory, no matter what velocity. That's incredible. That's amazing. That's God, right? No, they don't say that, right? They say, well, that's an interesting law. This is that law. And it's like, man, it's why don't, and even I think it was Einstein that said whenever he was talking about quantum entanglement, right? This idea that an electron is never the same once it touches another electron. And once they go away, they still, when you move one on one side and the other one does the same thing. And it's like, he said, that's spooky action at a distance, right? It's like, no, dude, that's called God. That's God. That's God. So they don't say these things. They say, well, that's a new. And so what they come up with is they say, look, we understand the universe, and we're just going to fill in the details. We're going to just give us a little bit more time, and we'll fill in all the details.
Yeah, that's originally what they believed about evolution, that the intermediate transitional animals would be found. Well, they haven't been found.
That's
right. There would have to be so many transitional animals that they should be everywhere, but they haven't found them. They haven't found them.
Just give us enough time. We'll sprinkle enough time on it, and we'll fix everything. That's their answer to for everything. Give us some time, and that's called dogmatic. You're adhering to something without the proof.
Yeah, I was challenged by, I guess, an atheist to read Richard Dawkins' book, The Greatest Show on Earth. He says, you read this book, then you'll understand why evolution is true and stuff. And I read Drew that book, and Richard Dawkins, he's a really good writer, and he does a really good job of
Sure.
explaining how DNA works and how all these things relate together, and he gives examples of dogs. But like I kept reading all the examples and how amazing it was. I was like, every one of the things he's talking about is a proof for God. And he's like, all these proofs for God, except that he's concluding something else. And I was like, I don't understand. This whole book has all these proofs for God in it, and yet like
Yeah.
it goes past the author who wrote it.
But the Bible has answers for what you're describing right now, Jeff.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
like not something that's ridiculous or crazy. I mean, the Bible speaks directly to that. That
Yeah.
the majority of people aren't going to get it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so when God created everything, if He told us, okay, so what I did is I took all of the potential energy of starts explaining all the quantum mechanics behind what He's doing.
Yeah.
Would that help us at all? No, he gave it to us in a way, not using prose, but using poems and using demonstrative language that would help us understand, or help the people at the time understand what it was He was doing, with the kind of language that would have made sense to them. And guess what? It still makes sense to us today. That's how amazing the Bible is. That's the things that were said back then to ancient peoples still makes sense to us today, and still is still true. That's the incredible thing. That's why this idea about the axioms. But look, there's so much more than in nature, let's call it, in this physical world, that has influences from the outside, from the spiritual realm, from God, ongoingly. There's so many things we could point out in the Bible that disprove this dogmatic statement. Again,
And another thing, just to think about this, I mean,
sure,
science has its place in that it's good to observe things and we can figure out how things
exactly.
work. It led to engineering. We're able to do cool stuff. You can learn a lot
Mhm.
from that, but science can't explain how Jesus turned water into wine, right? Like give me a scientific explanation of how Jesus turned water into wine, because there isn't one, because
Yeah,
it was beyond the physical world.
and
So
that
there's a
was the
lot
point of the
that
miracles.
occur, if you're involved with that God in your life, there's going to be a lot that occurs to you that is beyond this physical world.
Yeah, and that was the point of the miracles, right? Was to say, he was kind of like to say, hey, look, in this crazy mechanical appearing world, I'm doing something that is beyond belief for you, to prove my divinity in some ways, right? And it wasn't that he necessarily had to prove his divinity; he wanted to prove his divinity, right? There was a lot of this idea about healing, all these miracles he was doing to really bring in the waiting for the 3 days, because of knowing that the Jews would wait for 3 days to pronounce someone dead, then to be raised from the grave, right? To make sure that you have no logical explanation for what's going on here, that it must be from God beyond this physical world.
What's interesting, guys, is that within the last hundred years or so, actually less than that, science is actually punching up against an area,
It
what we'll
is.
call it quantum mechanics, quantum physics. It's reaching into this area of science that is not logical, does
Nope.
not make sense
Mhm.
from a natural perspective, but it is nature.
Yeah.
And that's what's causing debate among scientists. At
Yep.
least initially, they weren't believing in that realm that they were discovering. But through the last 70, 80 years,
Mhm.
they've done the experimentation to prove that there's this area of science that's like what you're reading about in the Bible, other
Yes.
dimensions, a
Mhm.
spiritual realm. You
Yeah.
can't
The
deny that
multiverse.
possibility in science today.
Yeah, you have these people at the heart of science, right? The peak, the pinnacle of science, that are religious, because they say we've seen it, we've done the experiments. The only explanation we have is that God exists, and that's God. That's why it's for him to say all scientists are dogmatic is like hold on, we say majority. Anyways, yeah, let's the next one is, and I think we'll probably just have time for this next one. Maybe I'll probably have to come back on for the others, but
This is a
is
good
the
topic, man. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like it.
yeah. Okay. Good. 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 I'm glad it's resonating. Is the total amount of matter and energy always the same? This idea that the conservation of energy, and I think it's the first law of thermodynamics, Is that true? And it's like, look, man, I think it was the 1960s that we came up with the idea of the Big Bang. It's like, which miracle are you going to believe?
Right.
The Big Bang is a miracle. Like suddenly out of nothing,
Yeah.
everything just all the laws, all the matter just came into existence.
Yeah.
Doesn't that disprove that law, right? That all
Right.
energy is the same, that it doesn't change, that all the law, so, and also
Yeah,
even if you
because
did,
what they say, Blake, is all that energy was this compact.
so
That
singularity.
everything in the universe was down to this level, this size.
Yeah.
We're smaller. That's like what? What?
Wait. Where's your proof? Well, we can't prove it, but just give us
Yeah.
enough time. We'll get there. But even then, let's say we did believe in it. I always say this: the Big Bang means a big banger. God could have very well created all. Let there be light. Boom. I mean that. So even then, it's like
actually, what it is this evidence. We have evidence of a beginning. That's what we have evidence of.
Yeah, now, very good.
Doing physics and like trying to figure out how's all that stuff fit into there, and so they come up with all these physics models, not thinking that God just could have just started it there and expanded it without having to worry about all the other parts. They're trying to create a physical model of something that didn't need a physical model. It was just a beginning, and we know there's a beginning. We know that from from observation. It's like, okay, and think about conservation of energy and matter or whatever. All right, so loaves and fishes, right?
That's right. That's a very good one. Yes, I didn't think about that
loaves
one.
and fishes. Did he take some dirt and convert the dirt into loaves and fishes? To conserve matter, or did he create new matter? And it seems like he created new matter.
Well, hey, listen, what did science once say? That they didn't believe the universe was expanding, but now the prevailing theory is that the universe is expanding, and they've done numerous experiments and what do they say about an expanding universe? That new stars are being created, new planets are being created out there in the edges. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what about that? Well, the idea, I think their excuse for that was that that there's this expansion, the big expansion, and then there's going to be the big crunch, right? They're coming back together,
right?
And that's the prevailing thought as well there. And then there's this idea of the multiverse, right? That it's kind of this undulation, this kind of oscillation of a. And anyways, can they prove it? I mean, they have the redshift. I mean, this whole idea about redshift, and even there's a lot of debate about redshift, and that there is some holes in that theory. The Higgs boson particle, they're looking for all this stuff that for dark matter and dark energy. But what else? So yeah, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was. I mean, it's there, right? We already have our. And so Christians, I think, need to kind of get themselves into a place where they are. If you believe in the Big Bang, you have to. I think you kind of have to have the angle of that God maybe used that model to create the universe, and how that is not necessarily problematic. Mm-hmm. But also the miracles in Egypt, right? I thought about this. That seems to defy this law of thermodynamics, right? All these different things that God had take place. The water in the Nile being turned to blood. That had to have monkeyed with all of this. These laws, right? They're habits. Yeah. They're things that we've noticed that are normally true. But God is all powerful. He can do all kinds of things.
Right. Where did all the locusts come from? Where did all the lice come from? Did he just create it right then and there, and cause it to go on the Egyptians?
Sure. So I mean, there's a lot of things that we could say about God bringing materializing. There's angels that materialize. That are from the divine realm that we've talked about on the show before, right? How does that gel with these laws? Does that supersede these things? And I think that God has a way that He's created things that work very well, and He can, God gets what God wants. You know what I mean? It's all powerful, and He can, kind of come in and phase out. And I think He's outside of time. We could get into time.
That's a big issue that we could talk about. Is about time.
but it's
that's another program. Yeah,
for sure. Well, we could end on that. I could get into, are all the laws of nature fixed, which is the next one, and they call them universal constants.
Hey, how many did you address today, Blake?
Two.
Two. So yeah, so we're gonna revisit this a couple times with you. Okay.
Yeah.
And what wasn't I was like, hey guys, before the meeting, I don't know if I have enough material for us to, Jeff was like, oh, get out of here. There's never, we always have enough stuff to talk about,
Yeah.
But
Good stuff.
Well, thanks for having me back on. And I think the takeaway, if anyone's listening to the show today, is like, look, we're not proving or disproving any of this stuff. We're just saying, look, it shouldn't be unquestionable. You should be able to question it. And the same thing, and I love that you brought this up, Mike, that you should say the same thing about your belief in God and the Bible. You should be able to prove all these things. You should be able to go and say, I believe these things because of this scripture. And if you can't, get to reading, and that should be for your an operating model for life. And so we're not saying all these things are true or not true, just saying that you should have a logical explanation for them.
Right on.
Yeah, I mean, we do believe that you can prove things, and there's things you can have a solid, like I believe in the Sabbath day, and the only thing that would change my mind about that would be somebody could show me in the Bible where it was changed.
Right.
That's not there.
Exactly. And you got to understand, you could argue with Catholics and Orthodox till you're blue in the face, but you got to remember something. They don't use the Bible as their only source of revelation or information. They make holy tradition and what the church fathers have said equal to the Bible. So that's why there are these differences. Yeah.
Gives you an opportunity to have empathy for them, by the way. That should be an access to, hey, look, because we're not going to prove people by being combative, right? We're going to peaceably disagree. Say, I don't agree with that because, look, how often has man been wrong? How often has and been in error, rationally? That they did, it wasn't their fault. Maybe let's give them the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly, because I was once a Greek Orthodox Christian, and so what I did, Blake, I wrote a book called "Why We Don't Pray to Mary and the Saints" to try to impact Catholics and Orthodox, because it's going to tell you why I changed my view. When you read the Bible, it doesn't say anything about Mary and the saints like the Orthodox and the Catholics teach today. So there's a problem there, at least for me.
Yeah, at least for me too. Yeah, certainly. Went to mass. And
Well, thank you, Blake, for joining us today. That's very, very good discussion. And we're going to have to have you back to discuss this some more. So we'll thank everybody watching. Again, this is pre-recorded, so definitely send us your comments. I'll put that up there. If you want to email your comments to Mike or emailing to me, I don't think I still have Blake's information, but what is your information, Blake, if anyone wants to contact you?
Blake at cemnetwork.com. That's Charlie Echo Mike Network.com. So you should be able to reach me there, or you can give us a call here at the office, 903-839-9300. I'll be happy to
right there. Let me see. Blake at cemnetwork.com.
You got it. There it is. Okay.
All right. So contact Blake. Let us know what you think. Thank everybody for joining us today. We'll see you next week.
Take care, guys.
All right. Goodbye.